Hello, everyone, and good morning, and welcome to our webinar on bed and breakfast insurance. My name is David Weston, and I chair the Bed and Breakfast Association. We're the trade association for owners of B&Bs, guest houses, and small independent hotels. We're a non-profit membership organisation, and we're here to inform, support, and represent our members. Today's webinar is open for non-members too, and we hope you find it very useful. The BBA, Bed and Breakfast Association, is run by bed and breakfast owners for bed and breakfast owners, and our aim is to help you with everything to do with running your business. So in today's webinar on insurance, I'm delighted to be joined by two experts from Marsh Commercial, who are our insurance partners. Robyn Edwards, who's Business Development Executive. Morning, Robyn.
Morning.
And Ben Richardson, Product Manager. Hi, Ben. Morning.
Morning.
So we're going to focus today on understanding common and emerging risks, risk reduction strategies, and essential insurance needs for bed and breakfasts. A few weeks ago, we asked our members to submit questions about insurance for this webinar, and we've had some of those from you, and we plan to answer those as much as we can this morning. But do use the question answer feature in Zoom if you have any questions. So just open that up and put the questions in the chat. We'll try our best to answer during the webinar if we can. But if not, we can follow up any questions in our follow-up email after this webinar. The webinar is being recorded, and the link to the recording will be emailed to everyone who's registered today, and it'll also be made available to all our members, of course, along with other resources and past webinars and other information. So, firstly, Robyn, can you talk us through the difference between B&B insurance and ordinary home insurance, which people will be familiar with, buildings and contents cover, and also give us an idea of why it's much more expensive often than the standard buildings cover?
Yeah, absolutely. So home insurance and bed and breakfast insurance serve different purposes and cover different types of risks associated with property ownership and operation. So some key differences between home insurance and bed and breakfast insurance. Home insurance is designed to protect homeowners from financial losses due to damage to their home and personal property, as well as liability for injuries that occur on their property. Typical covers are damage to the structure of the home, so from fire, theft, vandalism, or natural disasters. Personal property inside the home, so that's furniture, electronics, and liability coverage for injuries to guests or damage to others' property. The usage for home insurance is intended for primary residents and may not cover business activities conducted from the home, whereas bed and breakfast insurance is specifically tailored for properties that are used for commercial purposes, such as renting rooms out to guests. General covers for bed and breakfast insurance include the building and contents, similar to home insurance, but with additional provisions for commercial use. Liability coverage that addresses the unique risks associated with hosting guests, such as injuries or accidents that occur on the property. And business interruption coverage, which can help cover lost income if the bed and breakfast must close temporarily due to a covered event. So the bed and breakfast insurance is designed for properties that operate as a business, providing accommodations to paying guests.
Yeah.
So in essence, while home insurance focuses on protecting personal residents, bed and breakfast insurance is tailored to properties that operate as businesses, providing coverage for both the property and associated risks of hosting guests.
Yeah.
If you are running a bed and breakfast, it's important to have the appropriate insurance to ensure you are adequately protected. So as mentioned previously, there are slight differences between the home insurance and bed and breakfast, things such as the liability and business interruption coverage, which
just to to cover that, and so I understand it, Robyn. So the risks that you incur as a B&B owner, if you've got paying guests, is, for instance, and this is a sort of worst case type scenario, is one of your guests falls down the stairs, injures themselves, and then sues you as the owner.
Absolutely.
And that could be a very, very large sum these days of money, which otherwise you would be personally liable for. But under B&B Insurance public liability cover, that sort of risk is covered, so you don't have to worry about that.
Yes, absolutely. So,
and presumably that's a high risk and potentially high cost to the insurer, and that's one of the reasons why cover is much more expensive than standard home cover.
Absolutely. So you're bringing in paying guests, and it is a commercial business insurance essentially. So it's making sure that those you are protected against anything that happens whilst the guests are at that property. Ben does have some real life examples which we will move on to. That liability one, as you mentioned, somebody falling down the stairs, and a high, payment for that with insurers. That is a real life example that we have, but I'll let Ben cover that off there. So that's essentially the differences between bed and breakfast insurance and home insurance, and that is, in a nutshell, why it is a little bit more expensive than home insurance.
Yeah, and then briefly, the other one you mentioned was business interruption. So obviously that doesn't apply in a home, but if, for instance, you have a flood or some reason you have to close for a period of time and you have to cancel bookings or refund bookings, then that's the sort of thing that business interruption
absolutely
covers.
Yes, so business interruption cover would be there for any issues that may disrupt any operations, as you mentioned, natural disasters, system failures, etc. And that point, that's where you would, as you rightly mentioned, you'd have to cancel bookings, to which point the business is losing money. So that's where the business interruption, which you wouldn't get on home insurance, that's a piece of coverage that you would have on bed and breakfast insurance. And all those aspects, all those additional covers that you would get on bed and breakfast insurance, in addition to what you would class as, the home insurance, that the typical property damage, so the property itself, the contents, you would get liability. That's the reason why it's a little bit more expensive, because you are getting that additional cover for commercial use as well, because home insurance is not set up for commercial use.
Yeah, I understand. We had a question I've noticed on the Q&A from Moraine. Does business interruption insurance include COVID? I think we anticipated this question because it's a question a lot of people asked, particularly back obviously during the pandemic. I think the short answer, as I understand it, is no, I'm afraid, because otherwise, if you want pandemic cover, I believe you can get it, but it's, for understandable reasons, very, very expensive indeed. Is that right, Robyn?
Yes.
Ben, Ben, come in.
So yeah, fair question. We were, as David alludes to, expecting it. It's the elephant in the room. Wasn't the insurance market's shining glory. So yeah, ultimately the answer is no. Insurers are putting much clearer wordings that COVID, or what they're actually, you won't see COVID specifically. They will be just saying sort of pandemics as a whole not covered. Insurance isn't designed or geared up to set up for those level of losses. To use insurance jargon, it's a fundamental loss. It's viewed in a similar light to war, nuclear risks. It's too large for the private sector to deal with. So that's they essentially say it's more of the government's responsibility to do it. So yes, there were issues on how the insurers responded to COVID. They're making their wordings much clearer that from the outset, it's just a flat no. Whilst that's not the ideal position, it's at least a clearer position of where you'd need to be. This moment in time, certainly in the SME market, it's not something we have facilities for. You may hear about the odd one, but it may be industry specific, or it may be a large corporate entity that is willing to spend vast sums of money for that protection.
So we'd have to look to governments to help with that level of event if it happened again, which hopefully it won't in our lifetimes, but you never know. We had to, in COVID, fight for a lot of things on behalf of our members from the government, and we were able to win various parts of pieces of support from the government, financial support from our members, including, I think at one point, for small B&Bs paying council tax, they paid £617 million out to those type of businesses in that category. But so yes, pandemics are an issue all of themselves. And well, there's another question here, which we have insurance cover for flood, but we're not in a floodplain or area, despite being noted by the insurance company. Maybe that's something we'll come to later when we're talking about specific risks, because we're going to go through things like that. But Ben, were you going to share any other real life examples of
yeah, absolutely
risks?
And I'll see if I can answer that question
Yeah.
in writing as well. So yeah, other risks. So that I'll touch on that liability one that was discussed. So someone falling downstairs. That is a very real life case we have ongoing. The insurers set aside a reserve of £1 million. So that's how much it is a guess at the end of the day of how much they think in a worst case scenario, if we have to settle this is how much we are liable for. Now the insurers are denying liability for the claim. When I say denying, they're not throwing out the claim for the insured. They're just saying to the third party who's been injured, we do not believe the insured is liable for this, and we are going to defend this. Those defense costs come at sizable amounts. You know, you're talking a few thousand, could easily get to 10,000 in defense costs alone. So that's why even for there, it's absolutely critical having an insurer having the strength and legal backing to be like, no, we do not believe this case, and here's the case law. These are the reasons behind it, and they will deal with that and deal with solicitors. So you're not necessarily having to do so. You know, property damage, the most common claim that we are seeing at the moment is storm. It's about a third of the claims that we see in Marsh for B&B owners. Most of them are, when we say relatively small, we're saying sort of under 20,000. Now that is a lot of money still. When, you know, for us to consider a large claim, we're talking hundreds of thousands, you know, millions in respect to property. But still, that's the most common one we're seeing. Now, fortunately, they are small enough that they can be dealt with relatively quickly. We're talking a few months. But what if they did drag out? You know, let's say storm completely tore off a roof. Business interruption would pay. You know, you can't allow any guests to come in, or even if it's not all your guests, say you have to half your premises can't be used and it's blocked off. Business interruption can still pick up partial losses as well, so you're not out of pocket, and that's the purpose of it is to respond following, you know, insured physical loss to the premises. Other common claims that we're seeing is escape of water, particularly in the winter months. Some B&Bs more likely being seasonal. So natural pipes freeze, they may or it may not be noticed for a long period of time. So it's just making sure that you're regularly reviewing your property to make sure that, you know, pipes aren't freezing, having the heating on consistently, or making sure it kicks in when temperatures don't reach certain below, you know, sort of 10 degrees is when the insurer starts saying you need to have the heating on to reduce pipe freezing. So those are sort of the common things that we're seeing at the moment.
Thank you. Thanks for that. And looking forwards, are there any emerging risks we need to watch out for?
Yeah, absolutely. So bed and breakfasts face a variety of risks that can impact their operations, finances, and reputation. So some of the most common risks, as Ben's alluded to, liability risks, so injuries to guests, you know, may slip, trip, fall on the property, leading to potential lawsuits, property damage, which we've alluded to as well. Aside from you know, the natural disasters, guests may also accidentally damage the property or cause harm to others, you know, whilst on the premises. We've covered off the natural disasters, so events like floods, hurricanes, earthquakes, they can cause significant damage to property. Fire hazards, so B&Bs often have kitchens and multiple guest rooms, and that increases the risk of fire. Theft and vandalism, so B&Bs can be targeted for theft, whether it's personal belongings of guests or property belonging to the business itself. Business interruption we've covered again, so events such as natural disasters, maintenance issues, temporary closures, they can all result in lost income. Regulatory compliance, so B&Bs must comply with local zoning laws, health and safety regulations and licensing requirements. Non-compliance can lead to fines or closures. We've got things such as reputational risks, so negative reviews or social media backlash can significantly impact B&B's reputation and any future bookings. One we haven't touched on yet, which falls into the liability, so employee risks. So if B&Bs employ staff, there's also risks related to employee injuries, so not just guest injuries. We've got workplace safety and compliance with labour laws. Cyber security risks is very much an emerging risk that we put a lot of emphasis on. So with the increasing reliance on online booking and payment systems, B&Bs face risk related to data breaches and cyber attacks. So definitely want to consider. Economic factors, so economic downturns can lead to reduced travel and tourism, impacting occupancy rates and revenue. So to mitigate the risks, B&B owners should consider comprehensive insurance coverage, implementing safety protocols, maintenance of the property, and actively manage their online reputation.
Right. Okay, thanks, Robyn. And Ben, I think you've been looking at some trends as well. Have you, about how are claims trending, anything that's coming out of that these days?
Yeah, I mean, to touch on cyber absolutely is one that's increasing. Now, there's not an immediate directly that you may think to B&Bs, but SMEs are prime target for hackers to be sought after. To use a classic phrase, that low-hanging fruit. That's where they see it as, and online booking is becoming more and more prevalent. It can be the lifeblood, and also people hold lots of data, which is very valuable to hackers to get out that onto them. Other trends we're seeing are requests, with EV chargers becoming more and more prevalent, the requests, can I use them? All we'd say is speak to your insurance broker or the insurer. It's not a guaranteed yes. One of our insurers that we use specifically has an extension of cover for it. They say, yeah, that's absolutely fine, but it's sublimited damage to the vehicle of 50,000, which may not even be enough for a lot of these electrical vehicles. They're easily 80, 90, 100,000 pounds. So just give due consideration for that.
That's a good point. Sorry to interrupt, but that's a good point. I mean, yes, a lot more of our members are getting EV chargers on site. We have an offer, £150 offer, an offer with a partner on EV charging, and it's a point I think some people would forget when they're just getting insurance, forget to even mention it. But yes, do mention if you have an EV charging point or plan to get one. Very much do mention it when you get your insurance quote.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always say just be open with your broker or the insurer on particular points where you're worried about cover. It may sound counterintuitive, but if it's a no today, that's fine. You can deal with that, manage it going forward. What you don't want is the no at the point of claim. That's the worst situation to be in, because you could have gone somewhere that would have covered the incident that you're after. Other requests are sort of having e-bikes, e-scooters on property. Now for the insurance market, it's quite a sore subject. Just with again, just ask the insurer, ask the broker. So under the Hotel Proprietors Act, if guests bring these items onto your premises and they're stolen, there's a limited liability the insurers are on for. I think it's about £500, which may not cover the cost for these scooters, particularly e-bikes, which are thousands of pounds. So generally what I'm alluding to there is kind of at the owner's own risk if they are doing so. So if you're offering a secure area, it's still at the owner's own risk. They need to be relying on their own insurance coverage. Just be mindful though, they have lithium batteries in and they have a tendency to self-combust. Whilst manufacturers won't really advertise that, it is something that the insurance market is generally struggling with. So all I'd say is I can't give a blanket answer across every single insurer. Just ask the question if you are thinking and allowed to do that, particularly if you're a B&B sort of in an area that's going to be that attracts the use of particularly e-bikes.
So again, it's a question, telling the insurer, telling the broker as you get your quote that you've got a space that guests occasionally ask to store their e-bikes in or whatever, and is that okay? Am I covered?
And the more questions we receive, and we do encourage it, the more we can engage with insurers to be on the front foot. Well, this is clearly a gap of cover. We want you to push cover limits. We want you to be able to say yes more frequently. The more questions, we will always do market research on what we think are the gaps in cover, but ultimately the people that know the gaps in cover or what they want are the insurers themselves. So the more questions we receive, the better.
Great. Thank you. And what about practical tips that we might have for managing and reducing risks? So things that people, B&B owners, guest house owners themselves can do to reduce the risk to themselves and reduce the chance of having to make a claim and potentially in future perhaps reduce premiums.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are various things that we can consider in managing risks. There's things such as well, one thing that is rife in insurance at the moment is underinsurance. At the moment, we have an example of a client where they insured the building on what they thought the rebuild cost of 2 million. We actually provide a product that will allow for a risk assessment to be done. It's a cost of £180, including VAT. And what happened was we had this risk assessment done, and the property turned out to be rebuild cost of 3.4 million. Now, there's various things to consider here. Is that we've got the cost of average. So if you were to be underinsured on the insurance, let's say by 40, 50%, in the event of a claim, the insurers can actually reduce the cost of what they're paying out by the amount that you're underinsured. So if you're underinsured by 40%, they would only pay out, they'd pay out less the 40% of that you're underinsured by.
For claims in that category, I presume.
For claims, Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, is it for claims in that category or claims overall?
Claims in that category.
Claims in that category, yeah. So it is a really, really big issue at the moment. And there's things such as, along with the rebuild cost being, we needing it to be accurate, we need to, consider things such as inflation and cost of living. So all the prices are going up. So we need to make sure underinsurance is definitely to consider. A lot of the time, the properties themselves for B&Bs, are listed buildings. Again, that's something to take into consideration. There's sometimes the Cotswold stones, etc.
Yes, they're often more interesting or historic buildings, B&Bs, and it's a very good point that a lot of people don't think of. I think that they assume that if your building is destroyed by fire or something, that the sort of cost is the market value of your house, which you may be aware of. But if you think of what it would cost to rebuild your house in the correct style by builders at today's rates.
Yeah, the labour that's increased.
Labour has increased, huge insurance and building costs. That may be a much, much higher amount than the market value of your house. So yes, that's a good one to bear in mind.
It's even things such as the cost of actually removing the debris after the loss has occurred. That's, You know, that's a cost that people don't often consider as well. So that's something so that all ties into the actual property, you know, the value of the building sum insured that we're looking to insure the property at. So making sure that we're, you know, insuring the property at the value of what it would be to rebuild it is really important. Now, as previously mentioned, we do offer a rebuild cost assessment at a cost of £180, including VAT. Now, some people might feel that that is a little bit expensive, but if you were to go online, you know, and go look at that elsewhere to get that sort of risk assessment done yourself, you're looking at a much higher cost to have that done. So we actually get preferential rates with our partners to get those sort of things done, and that all ties into things such as when a claim occurs, if you were to have a complete loss and a total loss of your premises, you want to be able to evidence, you know, in recent years, in the last 3 years, you've had a valuation done.
Yes.
So it makes a claim so much quicker.
So it might cost £180, but potentially it could save you a million or more.
Oh, absolutely. It could save you so much more in the long run. Absolutely.
And RICS is the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. Is
correct.
That right? Yeah.
Yes, correct. Yes. So that's what insurers look for, is a risk assessment valuation done for property insurance. You know, so in addition to stuff like that, so that's the property aspect. But moving inside to the contents, you know, sometimes you can have things in your property such as fine art, antiques. They will also sometimes come at a cost. You know, a clock can be worth, an antique clock can be worth £3,000. So making sure that we have, you know, inventories done, photographs taken of all these items. If you've got valuations for them, that's even better. And just keeping those records up to date, making sure that they're in somewhere that you can get hold of them that is away from the premises, you know, stored on the cloud, or you've got them in a safe elsewhere, you know, keep them outside of the property. So in the event of a claim, there's a situation, you know, you're able to actually provide this evidence and these documentation to the insurers, and it will speed up the claim. And actually, whilst you're trying to get the business back up and running, you don't have to go back and forth trying to provide evidence and prove what was in the bill, what was in the property, what it was valued for. You've got that inventory ready there. And that kind of moves nicely onto another product that we do offer as well, which is a product, I'll have to double check what the costing is, unless Ben knows it. But essentially, it's something that you purchase alongside your bed and breakfast insurance. And in the event of a claim, it actually you actually get a loss, is it assessor? Because the loss adjuster works on behalf of the insurer. You get a loss assessor that works on behalf of you, and they work within the insurance industry, and they would actually be able to, you know, deal with the claim on your behalf, so that you can focus on, you know, getting your business back up and running as quickly as possible, because making a claim can be so stressful at the best of times, you know. And if you're back and forth and you're trying to get the business back up and running after a loss, you know, it's taking things like that into consideration, and having somebody work on your behalf in the event of a claim, and doing things, you know, to help speed that process up, so you can get back to the B&B and doing what you love to do, and having your, you know, your business run and flourishing once again. There are other aspects which I'll let Ben talk about, such as security measures and risk management, etc. But from a claims and an underinsurance and a keeping good records, that actually manages your risk. And if you can do that every 1 to 2 years, just go through, make sure you've got updated pictures, valuation.
Pictures are so good these days. It's so easy to do, isn't it? Take pictures of all your valuables, your antiques, your pictures, and everything. It makes things so much easier if it comes to making a claim.
100%. And I feel like, you know, it's it can feel like a large cost when you're having to pay for these valuations at the start of taking out the insurance. But like you've rightly said, David, that £180 is nothing compared to what it could be if you're 40% underinsured, and then you've got a big bill on your hand, which could essentially, you know, annihilate your business getting back up and running again if you're having to fork that bill yourself.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. We're getting a lot of questions on the chat, which we'll try and pick up towards the end, especially. There's one I just noticed, which I think we could perhaps answer quickly. Neil says, if you say it's at owner's own risk, is that an insurance? Is that a valid defence? If I try and answer first, I might be wrong, but as far as I understand the law, you can't get out of your legal obligations by simply saying it's somebody else's risk if it's your risk. So I believe you can't avoid those kind of obligations we've been talking about, liability insurance and things, by simply saying staying here is at the guest's risk.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, so B&Bs have to comply with the Hotel Proprietors Act, but conversely, insurers will only pay out liability alongside that. So, you know, items, I think the limit is £500 and £750 for London. Can't remember. Don't quote me too heavily on those figures. You know, items in excess of that insurers aren't going to be essentially be paying out. They are going to cap their liability in line with
so there are caps, and we need to be aware of that. And in terms of items, if you're storing items, I think what Neil might have been getting at is guests bringing valuables and things. They are, as you say, there's limits on those. So if the guest happens to have extremely valuable items, jewellery or whatever, no normal insurance would cover those sort of things unless the guest has their own insurance for things like watches, for instance, on a worldwide basis, so it covers them when they're somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. Now the insurer for the watch will in no doubt contact the B&B insurer and recover the £500 or what they're legally able to do so. When it comes to certain to the car parks, those notices are absolutely fine, and the insurer that gives the extension cover, they do stipulate you need to have a sign in the car park saying, you know, we're not liable for damage.
Oh yes, it's very good to have those signs, but it's not. They don't necessarily remove you from your legal obligations, but it certainly helps to say that. Yes, definitely should do. Yeah.
Yeah, correct.
Good.
So yeah, absolutely falls down to the Hotel Proprietors Act ultimately.
Yes, and security. You know, the security measures also is good for people to put in hand as much as they can.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Right. So let's move on to just look at what are the essentials that B&B guest house owners should be considering. What are the essential elements of a policy that you need to look out for?
Absolutely. So we've covered off a lot of areas today. I think there's a common theme. You know, your property and contents insurance definitely have covered your public liability and your employer's liability if applicable. You know, we've got other things such as the business interruption as well. And one thing that both myself and Ben would always stress is the cyber liability as well, you know, making sure you're protecting against any data breaches or cyber incidents from that. One thing I just wanted to point out, just going back to the managing risks aspect, and I think, Ben, you mentioned it previously, just on the alarms, you know, the BT Red Care alarms, just managing the risks as well. So some people may have BT Red Care at the moment within their premises, and I believe that the regulations are changing next year. Is that right?
It's not the regulation. BT are actually pulling servicing BT Red Care alarms. For now, it's August 2025. A lot of insurers stipulated previously, you know, when it came to alarm conditions, they would want you know, it to be BT Red Care. There are other ones that they will consider. So if you do have an alarm condition on your policy, you will definitely engage with your insurer or broker that what alarm do I need to have in place going forward. Generally, what they'll be looking for is, does it get immediate police response? Does it go through to, say, your
This is
phone's confirmed?
burglar alarms we're talking
Yeah,
about on
burglar
this.
alarms solely. Yeah, solely burglar alarms. There's no change to fire alarm regulations that we're immediately aware of. It's BT Red Care, which, alarm conditions are very prevalent, particularly if you've got high value contents. If you don't have an alarm condition, still good to get that updated anyway. If you have a BT Red Care, would always recommend an alarm on your policy. Sometimes you can get a premium discount for declaring that, sometimes not. So sometimes it may seem counterintuitive. If the insurer's not requiring it and there's no discount, we won't disclose it because they can start putting onerous policy conditions on you. So again, it's just speaking to your broker on sort of what the best course of action is and what the best policy terms and conditions can be for you.
Great.
Absolutely. And I think there was another thing just about regular maintenance as well of premises and
absolutely.
any emergency plans.
Yeah. So naturally, there is a requirement from insurers that the property has to be in good condition. There is just an overall expectation on any property insurance, your home insurance, and B&B insurance, that the property has to be in good condition. Then it's not there to fall on, if things fall into a poor state of repair, things like mold and so on. That's a gradually operating incident. Having sort of that regular risk management of just inspecting the property. Is the roof in good condition? And evidencing that, if it's in writing, that great, we can put that to a claim. There was one that went through very, very quickly because the B&B owner said, yeah, here's my full risk management. I've done regular photos. The insurer didn't even query the loss. They were very content. The B&B owner was so upfront that all the insurers asked is, can you get 2 quotes for the repair, and we will pay. It was as quick, as simple as that. The reason insurers ask a lot of questions because they need the evidence that the loss has occurred, and that is also a genuine loss that meets the policy terms and conditions. So the more upfront you are with the information of this is what we're doing, we're being proactive. Conversely, it also reduces the likelihood of you making a claim. If you're making sure the property is in good condition, it's less likely to be an incident that does occur. It's also just safe housekeeping. Fire risk assessments, are pathways always clear? Have you got the right doors? What is your fire suppression? All these kind of things, which insurers will be to a point expecting you to do. But the more you can do in regard to fire risk management or any other risk management, it could be of your staff around the cleaning chemicals, the likelihood of a claim occurring reduces, which should also longer term help you save on premiums. And also may also get you some premium discounts up front, depending on sort of the risk management that you're undertaking. As part of this as well, sort of one thing that's really, really good to form part of risk management is a business continuity plan. Now, this may seem very heavy for a B&B, particularly if it's next to your home. What is there to do is, if an incident occurs, properties immediately destroyed, or there's a sudden flooding, it's what are you going to do in the first 24 hours? Who are you going to notify? Where's the nearest fire brigade? All these kind of things. What are you going to immediately do to respond to that incident to help mitigate and reduce the impact of the claim? Insurers may not immediately ask for that, but again, it's having all these things which will just make the claim a little bit less stressful. It's going to be stressful, unfortunately, regardless, but it's just reducing that high immediate stress. And you already know, sort of kicking in, this is what I'm going to do in these incidents.
Okay, thanks very much, Ben. So just conscious of time a bit, going to onto what are the essentials that we need to look out for in terms of the sections of policy that you need.
Yeah, so it's the property insurance, the business interruption insurance, your liabilities, that's both public and employers, and we'd stress the cyber liability as well.
Yes, so those are all the elements of cover you need to look out for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, and before we sum up a bit later about overall insurance requirements. Just trying to pick up one or two of the questions that have popped up in the chat while we've been going on. Lee says, my wife and I are in partnership. We running our B&B. We don't have employees, so would we need employers' liability? Presumably, we wouldn't, or is it just part of the package?
Yeah. So as far as the law is concerned, no, you don't. Would recommend it still, because ultimately, either one of you could sue the other if you're injured. Not the most loving relationship if you do, but that's not what I'm here to answer. So no, not legally. It's quite often insurers do include employer's liability as part of the package.
In case you maybe insure somebody just very on a piecework basis for a few hours to do cleaning or something.
Exactly, or even volunteers. Sorry, that would fall under the.
Oh, okay. Yes, even if they're not paid, but they would
Correct.
be doing something for you. Yes. Sweeping a drive or doing something, anything.
Yeah. So
then if something happened to them and they made a claim, that's the sort of thing that we cover.
Absolutely. And even if you have a friend that comes in and says, "Oh, I'll help you hoover," immediately the law says you need employer's liability. So it's good to give you that flexibility. You don't have to pay them. It could be, "Oh, I'll buy you a pint." Doesn't matter. You owe them the same duty of care as you do as an employer. So
it doesn't necessarily. We're not necessarily just talking about people who are on the PAYE and you're paying regularly. It's anyone that might help do things around the place at any time. So that's useful to know. Thank you.
So the exemption is probably say to what the full exemption is. So you don't need employer's liability if you don't employ anyone, for starters. If you're only employing immediate family members, however, that doesn't apply if you're a limited company. So if you're a limited company and it's husband and wife, legally you have to have employer's liability. So in the question it said it doesn't seem like you're a limited company, it's just a normal partnership. So no, you don't. But if you're operating under a limited company in that scenario, you do have to have employer's liability.
Thanks very much, Ben. And with all these things, I mean, that's one of the values of dealing with a broker like Marsh is that you can ask all these questions when it comes to getting a quote or renewing. You can ask all these specific questions and be helped out with them. But it's really interesting to know that. One other question that's come up, some B&Bs, and this happens a lot, we know, with our members, close for a few months over the winter. If this is the case and the owners go away for a while, it can sometimes be difficult to get reasonable insurance. Is this something that can be accommodated, or what should we be aware of when we close for the winter?
Yeah, so ultimately you have to disclose that to insurers. They would treat that as unoccupied. Unoccupied properties are one of the more difficult ones. I can't shy away from that. Now, yes, we can absolutely source coverage for that, but it is more expensive compared to a B&B that is open all year round. There's multiple claims data that do substantiate and verify properties that are unoccupied are susceptible to more claims. What you also have the issue of is if a claim, let's say a claim would have occurred regardless, a pipe was going to burst, whether it's occupied, fully occupied or not. When it's unoccupied, you don't notice the claim for 7, 14, 30 days, however long. That makes the incident far, far worse and far more costly. So that's why insurers do load premiums accordingly or restrict coverage when the property is unoccupied, or they may impose certain policy terms and conditions. So yes, absolutely you can do it. But there is a reduced market and increased cost to it because there's substantial evidence from insurers. And we also see it as well from unoccupied properties that they are at increased risk of loss.
I would also just add to that, speak to if you insure through Marsh or another broker, speak to your broker, because the current policy that you may have something within the wording that allows for a certain period of time unoccupied under that policy. They would, like Ben rightly says, impose things to be done. If you've got a friend that can go check on that property on a weekly basis while you're away, just double check the policies to what that stipulation is within the wording, whether they allow for the property to be unoccupied for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. if it's extended after that, obviously we'd then have to look for, like Ben rightly said, you know, a product specifically for an unoccupied property. But nonetheless, inform your insurers first and foremost. They will advise you what implications that will have on the insurance first and foremost, if they can and can't cover it, and if they can cover it, what that would look like, what you would have to do, or what things you would have to put in place whilst you're not there.
Yeah, and thanks, Robyn. And the key thing is that the risks for the insurer are higher if you're not there. We just had a question on the chat saying that, yes, I may close during the winter, but actually I'm still there because it's my home. So if you're still there, again, you must disclose, you must tell the insurer, but that'll be much lower risk. So I would imagine the premium wouldn't go up too much if the person is closed as a business, but still there in the building, looking after it.
Wouldn't necessarily be classed as unoccupied property then, am I correct in saying that, Benny? Because
yeah, it's circumstance specific, that question. Insurers will view unoccupied different to others. There's not a truly consistent approach, but in that scenario, you know, being a broker, I'd like to think we could argue that's not unoccupied. You know, you can easily look at the premises once every 7 days. That's the main thing, is, you know,
they're living there. It's their home,
yeah,
so they're there.
So in that scenario, yeah, I'd like to think and argue, no, that's not unoccupied. It's partially unoccupied, yes, but I think we'd be able to be able to come to an agreement with the insurers.
Yeah, and the key thing with all these things is to say exactly what the situation is.
Yes, speak to us. We'd be able to guide you and, you know, speak with the insurers on your behalf and outline exactly what needs to be done, and what things you need to consider. So that's what I would stress, is the biggest part is actually, if you've got any questions, rather than just assume, or if you're unsure about anything, speak to us. We will be able to guide you. We'll be able to advise what's the best course of action, what you should consider, etc. So it's just about, you know, that's what we're there for, is to guide and to support in any situation, whether that be unoccupied property, or how do I manage my risk better, you know, what alarms do I need to have in place, you know, what policy I need this kind of cover, I'm unsure about this kind of building some insured, you know, just speak to us. We've got, I'd like to say, all the answers to everything, but we can most certainly guide and be that support system for you. So don't sit in silence. I'd really, really stress, if you've got a burning question, or you're just a little bit unsure if the policy would react in a certain situation, give us that scenario. We can then look into it and give you a solid answer on that.
Yeah, thanks, Robyn. And we do hear from our members that they find it helpful to be able to talk to somebody at Marsh who's can give that advice. And as a broker, you've got various insurers you can deal with, so you can deal with a panel of insurers, but you're aware of all the different issues that come up from B&Bs and guest houses. Well, so we're coming to an end on our webinar today, and as I say, we'll follow up all those who've registered with an email. But just to sort of sum up of where we've been in terms of, let's try and focus on 5 or so key takeaways that we can sum up this webinar with. Yep,
absolutely. So, you know, if I were to categorise the top 5 things, is to make sure you've got the correct insurance in place first and foremost. Don't rely on your home insurance, because it won't cover you for the B&B aspect of the commercial business. Second one would be things like, make sure your valuables are all up to date. So your rebuild of the property itself, the contents, any art, antiques, etc. Keep you know, inventories of that, which would kind of lead me on to the third point, is keeping your records and paperwork as up to date as you possibly can. You know, it's so important in the event of a claim to be able to provide that evidence to the insurers. It makes the claim so much quicker. There's no disputes over, you know, what was actually in the premises, what the value of these things were. You've got evidence of that, which you can provide really, really quickly to insurers. I would stress not to necessarily, when you're going to buy an insurance policy for your bed and breakfast, is don't necessarily always, look at the price tag, because there's things in there that you might not be covered correctly for. There might be endorsements, such as the unoccupied property. You might not be correctly covered for what you're looking for in a policy. At the end of the day, this is your livelihood, and it's not really worth jeopardizing, the future of your bed and breakfast for the sake of a policy that's £50 or £100 cheaper than what
you don't want the surprises when you come to make a claim. You want to know what you're covered for in advance.
Absolutely right. So it's really what you're looking. What is the value? What you want is a policy to react in the event of a claim. You want it to be as simple as straightforward, and you want insurers to pay out at the end of the day, because that's what you're paying for insurance for. So I'd really stress, don't always buy cheap. It's really about the value of the product that you're purchasing, and will it react in the event of a claim. And that kind of leads me on to the point 5 is, sometimes when you're buying online, you're doing it off your own back. There's nobody there that you can really ask questions, and you can call the insurance companies, but chances are you're going to be on the phone for an hour or so waiting to speak to somebody. So use a broker. That's what we're here for. We've got a lot of questions, frequently asked questions that come to us that we can actually guide you on quite quickly if you've got anything. But the second part of that is, again, in the event of a claim, having a broker there and having somebody, a dedicated handler that you can pick up the phone to every single time, you're going to get to the same person. You don't have to, go through everything and discuss everything all over again every single time you call somebody. You'll have a dedicated handler from, looking after your policy on a day-to-day basis. But again, in the event of a claim, you'd be provided with a dedicated claims handler, and it reduces that stress. You get that claim support. You get somebody who knows what's happening, knows what the situation is. You don't have to ring up every single time and re-go through absolutely everything and speak to a different person and be on hold for however long. You've got a direct line into one person, it's one-to-one, and that's what we're there for. So I would summarise, that's a very long summary, but that's essentially what I'd do is, make sure you got the correct insurance, paperwork's up to date, you've got all your valuations done, you've got a product that works for you and actually will respond in the event of a claim, and you've got the support of a broker there willing to help and answer anything that you need. And in the event, you've got somebody there that, again, will guide you through any claim support.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good summary. And as Marsh Commercial knows this particular marketplace, the B&Bs and guest houses, they're not the same as hotels, but they are a unique kind of business, but a business that you specialize in. Well, thank you very much, Robyn and Ben, and a big thank you to all of those who are watching this morning. I hope it's helped you get the best insurance cover for your business, because all businesses are different. You'll receive a follow-up email from us, including the recording of today's webinar, linked to that in due course, and additional resources will be made available, including a useful insurance essentials guide from Marsh. So to sum up, thank you, and do get in touch with Marsh for a no obligation quote based on your business insurance needs. And good luck with that. And thank you again for watching. Best wishes for the winter season, and goodbye for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.